Give me the thick one, Mountain Man declared after being offered 10 mail-order brides. The dusty rail town froze in shock. 10 women stood trembling in line, but he pointed to the one everyone mocked. A scarred man of the mountains claimed the bride no one else wanted, but the jeers of the crowd were nothing compared to what came next. Because this woman carried a secret, an inheritance of land and water that powerful men would kill to control. Suddenly, their marriage was no longer a joke, it was a battle for survival. Barns would burn, jail doors would slam, and the future of settlers and Apache families alike would hang by a thread. Could a woman scorned for her size become the strength that saves them all? And when the gun smoke clears, will their love be enough to stand against the greed of an empire? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. A bitter wind whipped through Gunnison streets, rattling the depot's windows and making the waiting crowd pull their coats tighter. Snow crunched beneath stomping boots as townsfolk huddled together, their breath forming clouds in the freezing morning air. The train whistle had drawn them here, heralding the arrival of 10 mail-order brides from back east. The women stood in a neat line along the platform, their faces pinched with cold and nerves. Most were delicate creatures with pale complexions, clutching small carpet bags and trying not to shiver in their city clothes. They looked lost among the rough-hewn buildings and weather-beaten faces of the frontier town. At the end of the line stood Luna May, head and shoulders above the other women, her patched wool coat strained at the seams, unable to fully contain her sturdy frame. Unlike the others who kept their eyes downcast, Luna held her chin high despite the whispers and sideways glances. Her hands, red from cold, were strong and capable-looking. Hands that knew honest work. "Looks like they sent us a workhorse instead of a bride," one man muttered, loud enough to carry. Snickers rippled through the crowd. "Reckon she could pull a plow better than my mule," another added, drawing more laughter. Luna's cheeks flushed, but she didn't lower her gaze. She'd heard worse on the journey west, had endured the stares and mockery at every stop. Still, each jab stung like the bitter wind. Reverend Whitaker cleared his throat, trying to restore order. "Now, brothers and sisters, let us welcome these brave young ladies who've traveled so far to help build our community." He smoothed his collar against the cold. "We'll begin the introductions and then, give me the thick one." The deep voice cut through the morning air like an axe through ice. The crowd parted as Ephraim Cutter stepped forward, his heavy coat dusted with snow and smelling of pine smoke from his cabin in the hills. His scarred jaw and weathered face spoke of years in the wilderness, trapping and hunting far from town. Gasps and titters erupted from the crowd. Even the Reverend seemed at a loss for words. Mr. Cutter, we haven't even begun the formal introductions," Reverend Whitaker stammered, but Ephraim was already moving, his boots leaving heavy prints in the snow as he approached Luna. He stopped before her, his tall frame matching her height. His eyes, sharp as a hawk's, met hers directly. "Name's Ephraim Cutter," he said, his voice softer now but still carrying across the suddenly quiet platform. "Got a cabin up Tomichi Creek way. Needs a woman's touch, truth be told." He paused, studying her face. "You look like you got sense enough to survive a mountain winter." Luna's heart hammered in her chest, but she kept her voice steady. "Luna May Crawford, Mr. Cutter, from Pennsylvania." A woman in the crowd made a sound like a suppressed laugh. Ephraim's head turned slightly, his sharp gaze sweeping the onlookers. The laughter died instantly. "Pennsylvania," he nodded, turning back to Luna. "Good farming country. You know your way around a vegetable patch?" "Yes, sir. Worked our family farm since I was big enough to hold a hoe." Luna's voice grew stronger. "Can tend animals, too. Milk cows, doctor chickens, birth lambs if need be." Ephraim's scarred face didn't smile exactly, but something in his expression softened. "Ain't got much to offer. Cabin's warm, though, and there's game in the hills. Won't go hungry." He paused, then added, "Won't never raise a hand to you neither." Luna studied him just as carefully as he studied her. His clothes were worn but well mended, his beard neat despite the scars that marked him. Most importantly, his eyes held no mockery, only honest assessment, and perhaps a glimmer of something more. "Appreciate plain speaking, Mr. Cutter," she said. "Ain't looking for fancy things. Just a place to belong and work worth doing." He nodded, as if she'd confirmed something for him. Then, to everyone's surprise, he shrugged off his heavy coat and draped it over her shoulders. The warm weight of it settled around Luna like a shield, carrying the scents of wood, smoke, and pine. "Getting colder," he said simply. "Reverend, we'll be needing your services. Today, if you please." The crowd erupted in fresh whispers. Reverend Whitaker blinked rapidly, clutching his Bible. "Now see here, Mr. Cutter. There are proper procedures." "Been proper enough," Ephraim cut in. "Lady's freezing, and it's a long ride to the cabin." He turned back to Luna. "That is, if you're willing." Luna's fingers curled into the warm fur of his coat collar. For the first time since leaving Pennsylvania, she felt something unfurl in her chest, something that felt like hope. "I'm willing," she said clearly, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Well, I never," someone muttered, but there was less mockery in it now. Perhaps it was the way Ephraim stood beside Luna, as if daring anyone to say a word against her. Or perhaps it was the way Luna herself seemed to grow taller, more assured, wrapped in his coat and standing her ground. "Got my wagon round back," Ephraim said. "Need to get supplies while we're here. Flour, coffee, such like. Then we can head home before the weather turns worse." He offered his arm, as proper as any city gentleman. Luna took it, feeling the solid strength of him even through the layers of clothing. Together they walked through the parting crowd, their boots crunching in synchronized steps across the snow. Behind them, the whispers continued, but Luna barely heard them. She was focused on the steady presence beside her, the way he matched his stride to hers without hesitation. After years of trying to make herself smaller, to apologize for the space she took up in the world, here was a man who looked at her strength and saw value instead of shame. They reached his wagon, loaded with empty grain sacks and beaver pelts. A sturdy horse stamped impatiently in the traces, its breath steaming in the cold air. Ephraim helped Luna up onto the wooden seat, handling her strong frame with casual respect, then climbed up beside her. "Ain't much for talking," he said as he gathered the reins, "but reckon we got time to get to know each other proper, you and me." Luna settled his coat more firmly around her shoulders, feeling the lingering warmth of his body heat. "Reckon we do it that, Mr. Cutter." "Ephraim," he corrected quietly. "Best call me Ephraim, being as we're to be married and all." A smile tugged at Luna's lips, her first real smile since leaving home. "Ephraim, then, and I'm Luna." He nodded, clicking to the horse. As they pulled away from the depot, Luna heard the Reverend's flustered voice, trying to restore order to the proceedings. The other brides were being introduced one by one, delicate hands extended to their prospective husbands. But Luna found she didn't mind missing the formal ceremonies. There was something right about this, something honest in the simple way Ephraim had chosen her, had seen past the whispers and jokes to recognize what she truly was. The wagon rolled through town, stopping at the general store for supplies. Ephraim helped her down again, keeping her steady on the icy ground. Inside, he moved with purpose, selecting goods with careful consideration. Bags of flour and sugar, coffee beans, salt pork, and other staples. Luna added her own suggestions: yeast for bread, dried fruit for winter preserves, strong thread for mending. The shopkeeper's wife watched them with undisguised curiosity, but Ephraim paid her no mind. He simply nodded approval at Luna's choices and added them to their pile. When it came time to pay, he counted out coins without haggling, his movements unhurried despite the growing storm clouds outside. Back in the wagon, supplies secured under oiled canvas, Luna found herself studying her soon-to-be husband's profile. The scars along his jaw were old ones, white against his weathered skin. His hands on the reins were sure and steady, marked with the calluses of honest work. He wasn't what anyone would call handsome, but there was a strength about him that went deeper than mere looks. As if sensing her gaze, he turned slightly. "Having second thoughts?" "No," Luna said firmly. "Just wondering what made you speak up like that." "Most men." She trailed off, unable to finish. "Most men are fools," Ephraim said simply. "Looking for pretty things to break. I need a partner, not a porcelain doll." He paused, then added more softly, "Saw you standing tall, despite their nonsense. Reminded me of a young pine I got growing near the cabin. Trunks thick as my arm, stands straight through every storm. Beautiful thing, if you've got eyes to see it." Luna's throat tightened at the simple poetry of his words. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded once, eyes back on the road. "Got the Reverend coming out tomorrow to do things proper. Hope you don't mind. Waiting a day to be married." "Don't mind at all," Luna said. "Gives me time to get my bearings. Maybe start making your cabin into our home." Something flickered in Ephraim's expression, surprise perhaps, or pleasure at the word our. He didn't speak again for several minutes, but the silence between them was comfortable, filled with possibility. The wind picked up as they left town, carrying the first flakes of new snow. Luna huddled deeper into Ephraim's coat, grateful for its protection. Beside her, Ephraim guided the horse with sure hands, leading them toward the mountains that loomed ahead like great dark shadows against the winter sky. The Reverend Whitaker shifted from foot to foot in the biting wind, his fingers trembling as he leafed through his worn Bible. The depot's wooden walls offered little shelter from the strengthening gusts that whipped at their coats and stirred loose snow around their boots. "Now, Mr. Cutter," the Reverend began, "are you quite certain about this hasty arrangement?" Ephraim's scarred jaw tightened. "Ain't getting any warmer out here, Reverend." Luna stood beside him, her hands clasped tightly before her. The other brides had drawn closer, forming a loose circle with the scattered townspeople. Their whispers carried on the wind, some shocked, some amused, some clearly disapproving. "Very well, then." The Reverend cleared his throat. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here in the sight of God." The ceremony was brief, stripped down to its essentials by the cold and Ephraim's impatience. Luna's voice shook slightly as she repeated the ancient words, but her "I do" rang clear and strong. When Ephraim spoke his part, his deep voice carried the same quiet certainty he'd shown since stepping forward to claim her. "By the power vested in me," Reverend Whitaker concluded, "I now pronounce you man and wife." He hesitated, then added, "You may kiss your bride." Luna's heart thundered in her chest. She hadn't thought about this part. Ephraim turned to face her, his expression unreadable. Gently, with calloused fingers that belied their care, he lifted her chin. His lips brushed hers, rough with winter-chapped skin but surprisingly warm. The kiss lasted only a moment, but Luna felt its echo long after he pulled away. Ephraim reached into his coat pocket and pressed several coins into the Reverend's palm. "Much obliged," he said simply, then took Luna's hand in his. As they walked toward the livery stable, Luna heard the murmurs of the other brides behind them. "Poor thing," one whispered, "marrying a wild man like that." Another's voice held a different note. "Did you see how gentle he was, though? And that coat he gave her." The stable's dim interior smelled of hay and horse, familiar scents that helped steady Luna's nerves. Ephraim moved with practiced efficiency, leading out a sturdy brown mule and beginning to harness it to a small wagon. "Know how to handle horses?" he asked, the first words he'd spoken since their vows. "Some," Luna answered. "Had a draft horse back home for plowing." He nodded, apparently satisfied. "Mule's more sure. Footed in the mountains. Name's Betsy. She's stubborn but reliable." Luna approached the mule, letting it catch her scent. Betsy's long ears flicked forward with interest, and she allowed Luna to stroke her coarse neck. "Hello there, Betsy," she murmured. "Reckon we'll be getting to know each other well." Something that might have been approval flickered across Ephraim's face. He finished securing the wagon, then began transferring their supplies from the general store. Luna moved to help, but he shook his head. "Get yourself settled. Road's rough ahead." The wagon seat was worn smooth with use, the wood polished by years of travel. Luna climbed up, arranging her skirts and the heavy coat Ephraim had given her. She watched as curious townsfolk gathered at the stable doors, their faces a mixture of fascination and judgment. Finally, Ephraim swung, beside her. Without ceremony, he clicked to Betsy and shook the reins. The mule's hooves clopped steadily on the packed earth as they pulled away from the stable, away from the depot, away from the last vestiges of civilization Luna had known. The road leading out of Gunnison wound through snow-dusted hills that grew steadily larger, hinting at the mountains beyond. Wind cut through Luna's layers despite Ephraim's coat, and she found herself hunching against it. Beside her, Ephraim sat straight and seemingly unmoved by the cold, his eyes fixed on the path ahead. The silence between them grew heavy with unspoken questions. Luna stole glances at her new husband's profile, wondering what thoughts moved behind that weathered face. What kind of life awaited her? What did he truly expect of her? The uncertainty pressed against her chest like a physical weight. After what felt like hours, Ephraim spoke. His words were few but deliberate. "You'll do fine. The mountains don't forgive frail." Luna turned the phrase over in her mind, understanding slowly dawning. Where others might have heard harshness, she recognized the rough-edged compliment hidden within. He had chosen her for her strength, not despite it. The realization settled warm in her chest, a small comfort against the growing cold. As afternoon faded toward evening, the temperature dropped sharply. Ephraim guided Betsy off the main trail to a sheltered hollow beside a stand of pines. "Need to make camp," he said. Too dangerous to travel these roads after dark. He helped Luna down from the wagon, his hands strong and sure around her waist. Together, they worked to set up camp, Ephraim showing her his system with few words but clear demonstrations. A canvas tarp strung between trees provided shelter. Beneath it, he built a small fire with practiced skill, keeping it low and well contained. No need to attract attention, he explained when she questioned the fire's size. Mountain lions sometimes get curious. Luna's eyes darted to the darkening woods, but she kept her voice steady. Good to know. They shared a simple meal of salt pork and hard biscuits. Luna had brought a small jar of apple preserves in her trunk, and Ephraim's eyes brightened slightly when she offered to share it. The sweet taste of home seemed to thaw something between them, and he began pointing out the constellations appearing overhead, naming them in his quiet way. But as night truly fell, the cold intensified. Luna's teeth began to chatter despite her efforts to hide it. She wasn't used to mountain nights, to this bone-deep chill that seemed to seep through every layer of clothing. Ephraim watched her for a long moment, then stood and retrieved his bedroll from the wagon. He spread it near the fire, then pulled back the heavy wool blanket. Come here, he said softly. Luna hesitated, suddenly aware of how very married they were. Ephraim seemed to read her thoughts. Just to share warmth, he assured her. Ain't proper to let my wife freeze her first night out. The word wife in his mouth made her breath catch, but she moved to join him. He arranged the blanket over them both, his solid warmth at her back acting as a shield against the wind. Gradually, Luna's shivering eased. Thank you, she whispered into the darkness. He responded, already half asleep, but his arm had settled carefully around her waist, protective rather than possessive. Luna lay awake a while longer, listening to the pop and crackle of the fire, the whisper of wind in the pines, the occasional far-off cry of a coyote. Strange sounds, strange surroundings, strange man breathing steadily behind her. Yet somehow, wrapped in his blanket and his coat, she felt oddly safe. Perhaps, she thought as sleep finally took her, this was what the beginning of belonging felt like. The fire burned low, casting dancing shadows on the canvas above them. In the distance, an owl called once, twice, then fell silent. The night settled deep, around the hollow where man and wife slept, their breath mingling with the autumn wind, while all around them, the mountains kept their ancient watch. Dawn broke with a pearly light filtering through clouds heavy with snow. Luna woke to find Ephraim already up, feeding Betsy and securing their supplies in the wagon. The air held a sharp bite that made her nose tingle and her breath visible in small clouds. Storm's coming, Ephraim said, glancing at the sky. Need to make good time before it hits. They ate a quick breakfast of cold biscuits, then broke camp with efficiency born of necessity rather than familiarity. Luna's fingers fumbled with the canvas tarp, still stiff from the cold, but she managed to fold it properly after watching Ephraim's demonstration. The wagon creaked as they set out, Betsy's hooves crunching through frost-covered ground. The trail grew steeper, winding between towering pines that seemed to scratch at the low-hanging clouds. Luna pulled Ephraim's coat tighter around her shoulders, grateful for its warmth. The first snowflakes began falling mid-morning, dancing on the wind before settling like powder sugar on the pine needles. Luna watched in wonder as the landscape gradually transformed, familiar shapes taking on soft, white outlines. Pretty, ain't it? Ephraim's voice startled her. It was the first thing he'd said in hours. Yes, Luna agreed softly. We didn't get snow like this back home, not so early in the season. Mountains make their own weather, he replied. Best learn their moods quick. The snow fell harder as they climbed higher, the wagon's wheels beginning to struggle in the deepening drifts. Twice they had to stop while Ephraim cleared fallen branches from their path. The third time they stopped, he studied the trail ahead with a frown. Grade's too steep here, he said finally. Wagon's too heavy for Betsy to pull up alone. He turned to Luna. We'll need to walk alongside, help push when she struggles. Luna nodded, gathering her skirts as she climbed down. The snow was already ankle-deep, and her boots, sturdy as they were, weren't made for mountain winters. She stumbled on her first step, but Ephraim's hand shot out to steady her. Here, he said, offering his arm. Grip just above my elbow. I'll show you how to walk it. His arm was solid beneath her fingers, and she found herself learning to match his steady, deliberate pace. Short steps, he instructed. Keep your weight forward. That's it. Together they pushed when Betsy faltered, Luna's strong back and broad shoulders proving their worth. Despite the cold seeping through her clothes, she felt a small surge of pride when Ephraim nodded approvingly at her efforts. The afternoon light was already fading when Ephraim pointed ahead. "There," he said. "Home." Luna squinted through the swirling snow. At first, she saw only the dark bulk of a ridge rising against the gray sky. Then she made out a shape nestled against its base, a cabin, rough-hewn but solid-looking. Smoke curled from its stone chimney, carried away by the wind. "Neighbor tends it when I'm gone," Ephraim explained, noting her surprise at the smoke. "Keeps the place from freezing up." As they drew closer, Luna took in the details of what would be her new home. The cabin was small, built of thick logs chinked with mud and moss. A single window faced the trail, its shutters secured against the weather. A lean-to shelter extended from one side, currently housing a stack of split firewood. Ephraim helped her down from the wagon one final time, then led Betsy and the wagon under the lean-to's protection. "Get yourself inside," he told Luna, handing her a key. "Need to tend to Betsy first." Luna's cold, numbed fingers fumbled with the lock, but she managed to work it open. The cabin door creaked as she pushed it inward, releasing a wave of warmth that made her cheeks tingle. Inside, she stood still, letting her eyes adjust to the dim light. The cabin was essentially one room, with a cast-iron wood stove occupying one corner, its pipe disappearing into the ceiling. A narrow cot stood against the far wall, covered with wool blankets and what looked like a bear hide. Rough shelves lined the walls, holding an assortment of tools, cooking implements, and rows of dried meat. A table and 2 chairs sat beneath the window, and a collection of furs was stacked neatly in another corner. Everything was simple, functional, focused entirely on survival. Luna felt her throat tighten as she took it all in, not from disappointment, exactly, but from the stark reality of what her life would be. The door opened again, bringing a swirl of snow in Ephraim's bulk. He stamped his boots clean, then began moving around the cabin with practiced familiarity. He added wood to the stove, checked the water bucket, and began pulling ingredients from various shelves. "Hungry?" he asked, holding up a rabbit he must have snared earlier. "Stew won't take long." Luna nodded, suddenly aware of how little they'd eaten since morning. She shrugged off her coat, noticing a tear in the sleeve where it had caught on a branch during their climb. "Mind if I mend this while you cook?" she asked, pulling a small sewing kit from her bag. Ephraim looked up from where he was cutting the rabbit into pieces. "Appreciate that," he said. "Never was much good with a needle myself." They settled into their tasks, the silence between them broken only by the bubbling of the stew pot and the wind rattling the shutters. Luna's needle flashed in the firelight as she made neat, even stitches in the coat's tough fabric. The familiar work helped calm her racing thoughts, gave her something concrete to focus on besides the enormity of the change in her life. The stew's rich aroma gradually filled the cabin, making Luna's stomach growl. Ephraim stirred it occasionally, adding pinches of dried herbs and what looked like wild onions. Finally, he ladled portions into 2 tin bowls and set them on the table. "Ain't fancy," he said, almost apologetically, "but it'll keep body and soul together." Luna took her first spoonful carefully, savoring the tender meat and rich broth. "It's good," she said honestly. "Better than I expected." A ghost of a smile crossed Ephraim's face. "Man can't live on dried meat alone," he said, "though there's plenty of that too." He nodded toward the shelves. "Need to teach you which ones are elk, which are deer, different ways of cooking each." They ate in companionable silence, the wind's voice growing stronger outside. Luna found herself studying her husband's face in the flickering light from the stove. The scar along his jaw was more visible now, a pale line that disappeared into his beard. His hands, when they weren't wielding spoon or knife, stayed folded quietly on the table, as if he was conscious of their size and strength. When they finished eating, Luna insisted on washing the bowls, using water from a bucket near the stove. Ephraim watched her for a moment, then began pulling extra blankets from a trunk. "You take the cot," he said, spreading the blankets on the floor near the stove. "I'll sleep here." "But it's your bed," Luna protested. "I don't mean to put you out of it." Ephraim shook his head. "Ain't proper otherwise," he said firmly. "Besides, slept on worse plenty of times." Luna wanted to argue further but saw the set of his jaw and decided against it. Instead, she finished putting away the clean dishes and retrieved her nightgown from her trunk. Ephraim turned his back without being asked, giving her privacy to change behind a blanket she hung from a rope strung across one corner. The cot creaked as she settled onto it, the bear hide surprisingly soft against her cheek. She watched through half-closed eyes as Ephraim banked the fire for the night, his movements sure and practiced in the dimming light. "Sleep well, Luna," he said quietly, settling onto his blankets. You too, she whispered, back. The wind continued its lonely song outside, but inside the cabin was warm and secure. Luna lay awake for a long time, listening to Ephraim's steady breathing and the pop of cooling embers in the stove. This small space, barely more than a shelter against the wilderness, was her home now. The thought should have terrified her, but instead, she felt something else. A mix of awe, at the rugged simplicity of it all, and a strange sort of peace. Here was a place where her strength would be an asset, not a source of mockery. Here was a man who valued capability over delicacy, who had chosen her precisely because she wasn't frail. It wasn't the life she had imagined when she'd answered the marriage advertisement, but perhaps, she thought as sleep finally began to claim her, it was exactly the life she needed. The snow continued falling outside, wrapping the cabin in a blanket of white silence, while inside, man and wife slept beneath their separate covers, each contemplating in their dreams the strange new path their lives had taken. The morning sun painted the snow-covered mountains in shades of rose and gold, but its beauty did little to warm the frigid air. Luna woke to the rhythmic sound of chopping wood, the sharp cracks echoing off the ridge behind the cabin. She pulled on her clothes quickly in the biting cold, grateful for the remnants of heat from the banked stove. Through the cabin's single window, she spotted Ephraim's broad form, his breath clouding in the morning air as he swung his axe. Each stroke was precise, splitting logs with practiced efficiency. He'd already amassed a decent pile, but the lean-to could clearly hold more. Luna wrapped her shawl tighter and stepped outside, her boots crunching in the fresh snow. Ephraim paused mid-swing, nodding in acknowledgement. "Morning," he said, his voice gruff but not unkind. "Water's hot on the stove if you want coffee." "I can help first," Luna offered, eyeing the stack of unsplit logs. Pa always said, "Many hands make light work." Ephraim studied her for a moment, then gestured to a second axe leaning against the lean-to. "Mind your stance," he warned. "Ice under that snow could turn your ankle quick." Luna hefted the axe, testing its weight. It was heavier than the one she'd used back home, but not impossibly so. She positioned a log on the splitting block and took her first swing. The blade glanced off at an angle, barely marking the wood. "Here," Ephraim said, stepping closer. "Like this." He demonstrated the proper motion, explaining how to let the axe's weight do most of the work. Luna watched carefully, noting how he positioned his feet and shoulders. Her next attempt was better, though the log still didn't split. But on her third try, the satisfying crack of splitting wood rang out. The two halves tumbled into the snow as Luna smiled with quiet pride. "Not bad," Ephraim acknowledged, returning to his own work. They fell into a steady rhythm, the morning air filled with the sound of their labors. Luna's swings grew more confident, though she couldn't match Ephraim's speed or precision. Still, she managed to split several logs before her arms began to shake from the effort. "That's enough," Ephraim said, noting her fatigue. "Time for breakfast anyway." Inside the cabin, Luna stirred up the stove's embers and added fresh wood while Ephraim brought in some of their split logs. The coffee was indeed hot, and Luna soon had a pan of cornmeal mush bubbling alongside it. They sat at the small table, steam rising from their cups. "Been trapping these mountains going on 20 years now," Ephraim said suddenly, breaking their usual silence. "Started young, after the war, learned from an old mountain man named Josiah." He paused, taking a sip of coffee. "He taught me everything worth knowing about surviving up here." Luna nodded, encouraged by this unexpected sharing. "We had a farm back east," she offered in return. "Nothing grand, just 40 acres of rocky soil Pa, inherited from his father. The drought took most of it." She stirred her mush thoughtfully. "I learned early that hard work doesn't always mean success, but giving up means certain failure." "True enough," Ephraim agreed. His face softened slightly as he studied her across the table. "You ain't afraid of work. That's good. Mountains don't care if you're tired or scared or feeling sorry for yourself. They just are what they are." Luna was about to respond when the sound of approaching hoofbeats caught their attention. Ephraim was on his feet instantly, moving to where his rifle stood ready by the door. Luna watched as his entire demeanor changed, tension evident in every line of his body. The rider appeared around the bend in the trail, his horse picking its way carefully through the snow. He was well dressed for the weather, wearing a thick wool coat and fur-lined gloves. A leather satchel was secured to his saddle. "Mr. Cutter?" the man called out, reining his horse to a stop at a respectful distance. "Mr. Ephraim Cutter? Who's asking?" Ephraim's voice was cold as the morning air. "Samuel Whitaker, sir, attorney at law from Gunnison." The man slowly reached into his satchel, making sure his movements were visible. "I have urgent business with Mrs. Luna May Cutter, formerly Miss Luna May Harrison." Luna stepped forward, her heart suddenly pounding. "I'm Luna May Cutter." The lawyer dismounted carefully, producing a sealed packet from his satchel. "Ma'am, I represent the estate of your late uncle, Mr. Theodore Harrison of Denver. I've been trying to locate you for several weeks." "Uncle Theo?" Luna's brow furrowed in confusion. "I barely knew him. He visited the farm once when I was small." "Nevertheless, ma'am, you are his sole surviving heir." Whitaker held out the packet. "These documents require your immediate attention." Ephraim had lowered his rifle but hadn't put it down. He moved closer to Luna as she broke the seal and unfolded the papers with trembling fingers. The legal language was dense, but certain phrases jumped out at her. "Hereby bequeaths, water rights, mineral claims." "It's a tract of land," Whitaker explained, seeing her confusion. "Nearly 1,000 acres in the valley below, including recorded water rights to Thompson Creek. Your uncle purchased it years ago as an investment." Luna sat heavily on a nearby stump, the papers crackling in her grip. "I don't understand. Why me? Your uncle had no children of his own, and you were his only living relative when he passed last month." The lawyer's expression grew serious. "However, I must warn you, this inheritance is not without complications. Several ranchers have already attempted to claim portions of the water rights, and the railroad has expressed interest in running a spur line through the valley." Ephraim finally spoke, his voice tight with suspicion, "Meaning there's them that might try to take it by force if they can't get it legal." Whitaker nodded grimly. "I'm afraid that's a distinct possibility. Water rights in this territory are often worth more than gold. People have died for less." Luna looked up at Ephraim, seeing the concern in his eyes. Just yesterday, she had been grateful simply to have a roof over her head and a husband who valued her strength. Now she owned land that others might kill for. "The papers need to be signed and witnessed," Whitaker continued, producing an inkwell and pen from his satchel. "Once filed with the territorial court, your claim will be legally binding." Luna's hand shook slightly as she signed her name. Ephraim and Whitaker added their signatures as witnesses, the scratch of the pen loud in the winter stillness. "I'll file these today," Whitaker said, carefully storing the documents in his satchel. "I suggest you both be extremely careful who you tell about this inheritance. There are powerful interests in the territory who won't take kindly to a woman holding such valuable water rights." After the Rosas and Jarazan, lawyer rode away, Luna and Ephraim stood in silence, watching his horse disappear around the bend. The morning's peaceful routine seemed far away now, replaced by a weight of responsibility neither had expected. "Best finish bringing in that wood," Ephraim finally said, his voice gentle. "Storm's coming tonight, by the look of those clouds." Luna nodded, grateful for the simple task to focus on, but as they worked, her mind whirled with questions and possibilities. She had come to Colorado expecting nothing more than a hard life with a stranger. Instead, she had found herself with both a husband and land of her own, and all the dangers that came with both. The winter wind picked up, carrying the promise of snow, while Luna and Ephraim continued their work in thoughtful silence, each considering how this unexpected inheritance might change their lives. The wagon wheels creaked as they followed Attorney Whitaker's horse back toward Gunnison. Luna sat close to Ephraim on the bench, drawing warmth from his solid presence, as the winter wind cut across the open road. The lawyer had insisted they come examine the full deed and property maps, stored safely in his office above the Silver Dollar Saloon. Snow still clung to the shadowed sides of buildings as they rolled into town. The street was busy with morning traffic merchants opening shops, ranch hands leading pack mules, women hurrying between errands with shawls pulled tight. Heads turned as their wagon passed. Luna felt the weight of curious stares, heard the whispers that followed them. "Ain't that the big mail-order bride? What's she doing back in town so soon? Heard tell she came into some property." Ephraim's jaw tightened, but he kept his eyes forward as he guided their mule to the hitching post outside the saloon. The building's weathered facade loomed above them, its painted letters faded by sun and snow. A few early patrons already occupied the bar inside, nursing their morning drinks. "This way," Whitaker said, leading them around to a separate entrance at the rear of the building. "My office is upstairs." Luna gathered her skirts, careful on the narrow wooden steps. The stairwell smelled of stale tobacco and spilled whiskey. She felt painfully out of place in her simple wool dress and sturdy boots, like a draft horse among thoroughbreds. But Ephraim's steady presence behind her gave her courage to keep climbing. The lawyer's office was a small room crammed with filing cabinets and leather-bound books. A pot-bellied stove in the corner did little to chase away the winter chill. Whitaker cleared space on his desk, spreading out several large maps marked with surveyor's notes and property lines. "Here," he said, pointing to a section marked in red ink. "This is your uncle's tract now. Your land, Mrs. Cutter. It follows Thompson Creek through most of the valley, between these ridge lines." Luna leaned closer, trying to make sense of the terrain markings. The valley appeared to be prime grazing land, with reliable water and natural shelter from the worst storms. No wonder others wanted to claim it. "There's something else you should know," Whitaker continued, pulling out another document. "The Denver and Rio Grande Railroad has already filed claims for right-of-way across portions of the property. They're planning a spur line to connect new mining operations in the high country." "Can they do that?" Luna asked. "Just take what they want?" "Not legally, no. Not without the property owner's permission." Whitaker's expression was grave. "But railroad companies have ways of getting what they want. They've been known to pressure landowners, sometimes through less than savory means." "Meaning threats and strong-arm tactics," Ephraim growled. His hand came to rest protectively on Luna's shoulder. "This land's got a target painted on it, sure as sunrise." "There's more," Whitaker said. "The valley has been used as seasonal grazing land by both settler ranchers and Apache families for generations. Your uncle never enforced exclusive rights, allowing shared use of the water and pastures. It's created a delicate balance." Luna felt the weight of responsibility settling onto her shoulders. This wasn't just about property. It was about people's livelihoods, their very survival. "What should we do?" Before Whitaker could answer, heavy boots thundered up the stairs. The office door burst open, releasing a cloud of cigar smoke and the reek of whiskey. A man Luna recognized from the train station lurched into the room, one of the prospective husbands whose chosen bride had taken one look at him and refused to step off the train. "Well, if it ain't the mountain man's mare," he sneered, swaying slightly, his bloodshot eyes fixed on Luna with naked contempt. "Heard you came into some valuable property. Ain't that just fine and dandy?" Ephraim moved with surprising speed, placing himself between Luna and the drunk. "Get out," he said quietly. The menace in his voice made the temperature in the room seem to drop. The man laughed, an ugly sound. "Or what? You'll defend her honor? Ain't nothing honorable about a woman who takes what don't belong to her. Mark my words, you won't keep that land long. Better people than you have tried to stand against progress." He spat on the floor. "You'll lose everything, just like you deserve." Ephraim's hands clenched into fists, but before he could move, Whitaker spoke up. "Mr. Davidson, you are drunk and trespassing in my office. Leave now, or I'll have the sheriff remove you." Davidson sneered again, but backed toward the door, just sharing some friendly advice with the happy couple. He touched the brim of his hat in a mocking salute. "Good day to you all." The silence after his departure was heavy with tension. Luna realized she was trembling, though whether from fear or anger, she wasn't sure. Ephraim's hand found her arm, steadying her with his touch. "I apologize for that interruption," Whitaker said. "Unfortunately, Mr. Davidson represents the attitude of certain elements in town. They don't like the idea of a woman, especially a newcomer, holding valuable water rights." Luna lifted her chin. "Then they'll have to learn to live with disappointment." They spent another hour reviewing the property documents, with Whitaker explaining the legal implications of various claims and challenges they might face. By the time they left his office, the winter sun was high overhead, casting weak light through the clouds. The ride back to the line shack was quiet, each lost in their own thoughts. Luna watched the snow-covered landscape roll past, trying to imagine the valley that was now hers. Would it be worth the trouble it seemed destined to bring? As if reading her thoughts, Ephraim spoke. "We can sell it, if you want. Might be easier than fighting every rancher and railroad man who thinks they can bully you out of it." Luna turned to study his profile, weathered and strong against the pale sky. "Why did you choose me?" she asked suddenly. "That day at the station you could have had any of those other women. Pretty ones, delicate ones. Why pick me?" Ephraim was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Finally, he said, "Because you looked built for weathering storms." His voice was gruff but honest. "Saw it in your eyes, the way you held yourself despite their laughing. Figured anyone who could stand tall through that kind of mockery had the strength for mountain living. He clicked to the mule, urging it up a steep section of trail. Reckon I was right. Warmth bloomed in Luna's chest, chasing away the last of Davidson's bitter words. She sat straighter on the wagon bench, shoulder brushing Ephraim's as they continued their journey home. Whatever storms lay ahead, they would face them together. The afternoon light was fading by the time they reached the line shack, the sky heavy with the promise of snow. As Ephraim unhitched the mule, Luna paused to look back toward town, barely visible in the distance. The railroad wanted her land. The ranchers wanted her water rights. Men like Davidson wanted to see her fail, but she had something they hadn't counted on: a husband who valued strength over beauty, who saw worth where others saw only a target for ridicule. Perhaps that would be enough to help them survive whatever challenges lay ahead. The days grew shorter as winter tightened its grip on the mountains. Snow piled deeper around the line shack, transforming the landscape into a pristine white blanket broken only by animal tracks and the occasional path Ephraim cleared with his shovel. Luna found herself falling into the rhythm of mountain life, each day bringing new lessons in survival. Morning light filtered through frost-covered windows as Luna stirred a pot of porridge over the wood stove. She had learned to add dried berries and a precious sprinkle of sugar to make the simple meal more appealing. The cabin filled with warmth and the scent of breakfast as Ephraim stamped snow from his boots by the door, returning from his morning check of the traplins. "Caught 2 rabbits?" he announced, holding up his prize. "Good size on them, too." Luna nodded approvingly. "I'll get them ready for the stew pot later." Her hands had grown steadier with the skinning knife, though she still winced sometimes at the task. Necessity was a harsh but effective teacher. After breakfast, Ephraim surprised her by pulling out his old musket from its place above the door. "Time you learned to handle this," he said, running a cloth over the worn stock. "Can't always be around to protect you, and with that land dispute brewing." Luna took the weapon carefully, noting its substantial weight. The barrel was long and smooth, the stock polished by years of handling. "It's beautiful," she said softly, admiring the simple craftsmanship. "Beautiful won't save your life," Ephraim replied, though his eyes crinkled slightly at her. "Appreciation. It's slow to reload and you only get 1 shot. Gotta make it count." They spent the morning behind the cabin, where Ephraim had set up several targets, tin cans on a fallen log. The cold air bit at Luna's cheeks as she learned to load the musket, measuring powder carefully and tamping it down. Her first attempt at firing sent her stumbling backward from the recoil, the shot going wide into the snow. Ephraim's deep laugh rolled across the clearing. "Kicks like a mule, don't it?" But his hands were gentle as he showed her how to brace the stock properly against her shoulder. Luna's second shot was closer to the target, and by her third attempt, she managed to graze one of the cans. "Ha!" she exclaimed, grinning with triumph. "Not bad," Ephraim admitted, "though any varmint would have had plenty of time to run while you were reloading." Luna laughed, surprised by how natural it felt to share this moment of joy with him. "Then I suppose I'd better keep practicing." They continued until Luna's shoulder ached from the recoil, but she had managed to hit 3 targets. As they walked back to the cabin, Ephraim carrying the musket, Luna noticed how he moved more easily around her now, less guarded than in those first awkward days. The afternoon brought unexpected visitors. Luna was mending one of Ephraim's worn shirts when she heard the crunch of snow under wagon wheels. A family of settlers pulled up to the cabin: a gaunt-faced man, his tired wife, and 3 children with hollow cheeks and patched clothes. "Beg pardon," the man called out, hat in hand. "We're headed to my brother's place up north, but we've run low on supplies. Wondered if you might spare something for the little ones." Luna glanced at Ephraim, who gave a slight nod. She hurried to the stew pot still simmering on the stove, ladling generous portions into their few spare bowls. The children's eyes grew wide at the sight of the hot food. "Come in where it's warm," Luna insisted, ushering them inside. She cut thick slices of cornbread while the family huddled near the stove, their threadbare clothes steaming slightly as they thawed. The youngest child, a girl no more than 6 years old, touched Luna's skirt with a grimy hand. "Thank you, ma'am," she whispered. "It smells just like my grandma's cooking." Luna felt her heart squeeze at the simple gratitude. She found herself telling stories as they ate, silly tales about her childhood on the farm that made the children giggle. Even their mother's worn face softened as she watched her family's spirits lift. Ephraim remained quiet through it all, but Luna caught him watching her with an expression she'd never seen before, something warm and wondering. When the family finally departed, with extra cornbread wrapped carefully for their journey, He helped her wash the bowls in comfortable silence. That evening, they sat before the fire as wind whistled around the cabin's corners. Luna worked on darning a pair of Ephraim's socks while he cleaned his trapping tools. The quiet between them felt different now, filled with unspoken understanding rather than awkward tension. "You did a good thing today," Ephraim said finally, his voice low and thoughtful. "Feeding those folks." Luna's fingers stilled on her darning. It was nothing special, just stew and cornbread. "No." Ephraim set aside his tools and looked at her directly. "It wasn't just the food. You gave them hope. Made those kids laugh when they probably haven't had much cause for it lately." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "When I chose you at the station, I saw your strength in your build, in the way you held yourself. But I'm beginning to see there's more kinds of strength than just the physical sort." Luna felt warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the fire. "My mama used to say that kindness costs nothing but means everything." "Your mama was wise." Ephraim nodded slowly. "Reckon that's the kind of strength we'll need, dealing with this land dispute. Can't solve everything with force." They fell back into silence then, but it was rich with new understanding. Luna returned to her darning, aware of Ephraim's solid presence beside her, the steady way he moved through his tasks. The fire crackled softly, casting dancing shadows on the walls of their small home. Outside, snow began to fall again, adding another layer to the deep drifts around the cabin. But inside, something new had taken root, a warmth that went beyond the physical, a connection built on shared respect and growing trust. Luna felt it in the comfortable way they moved around each other now, in the glances they shared over simple tasks, in the quiet moments like this one. She had come to the mountains expecting hardship, prepared to endure a marriage of convenience. Instead, she was discovering that true partnership could grow in the most unexpected places, nurtured by simple acts of kindness and the recognition of strength in all its forms. The evening deepened around them, but neither felt the need to break the peaceful silence. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, more practice with the musket, more meals to cook, more decisions about the disputed land. But for now, they had this moment of understanding, as solid and real as the ground beneath their feet. The morning sun cast long shadows across the snow when hoofbeats approached the line shack. Luna looked up from where she was hanging wash on a rope strung between two pines, her hands red from the cold water. A well-dressed man rode toward them on a gleaming bay horse, his coat too fine for these mountains. Ephraim emerged from the cabin, standing on the porch with his arms crossed. His stance was casual, but Luna noticed how his right hand stayed near his belt. "Mr. Cutter," the rider called out, reining his horse to a stop. "Name's Mitchell. I represent the railroad's interests in these parts." He dismounted smoothly, his polished boots crunching in the plost. "Snow." "State your business," Ephraim replied flatly. Mitchell pulled a leather wallet from his coat. "I understand your wife has come into possession of certain properties in the valley. The railroad's prepared to make a generous offer for the deed." He withdrew several bills, holding them up so the sun caught the high denominations. Luna moved closer to stand beside her husband, her wash forgotten. The money Mitchell displayed was more than she'd ever seen in one place. "Not interested," Ephraim said. Mitchell's smile tightened. "Come now, Mr. Cutter. Be reasonable. That's good money for land you're not even using yet. More than fair, considering the circumstances." "What circumstances would those be?" Luna asked, her voice steady despite her racing heart. The foreman turned to her, his eyes cold despite his pleasant expression. "Why, the difficulties of developing such remote property, Mrs. Cutter. The mountains can be dangerous. Accidents happen out here all the time, avalanches, fires, unfortunate falls. Would be a shame if anything happened while you were trying to make something of that land." Ephraim took a step forward, his scarred jaw tight. "That sounded like a threat, mister." "Not at all." Mitchell tucked the money away. "Just friendly advice from someone who knows these parts. Think it over. The railroad's offer won't stay open forever." He mounted his horse with practiced grace and tipped his hat. "Good day to you both." They watched him ride away, the morning silence heavy around them. Luna's hands trembled slightly as she returned to her washing. "He means to frighten us," she said quietly. Ephraim nodded. "That's how they operate. Money first, then threats." Later that afternoon, while Luna was in town buying supplies, a ranch hand rode past the general store. She recognized him as one of the men who'd been at the train station the day she arrived. "Well, if it ain't the mountain man's mare," he called out, drawing snickers from the men, lounging outside the saloon. "Hey boys, reckon Cutter needed him a big one to survive the winter." More laughter followed. Luna felt her cheeks burn. but she kept her head high as she loaded her purchases into their small wagon. The ranch hand wasn't finished. Bet she eats more than she's worth. Hope Cutter's got plenty stored up for that appetite. Luna's hands tightened on the wagon's edge, but she refused to acknowledge the taunts. As she climbed onto the seat, she heard one of the saloon men drawl, "Guess when you're desperate enough, size don't matter none." The drive home was long and cold, but it gave Luna time to think. By the time she reached the cabin, an idea had taken shape in her mind. That evening, as they ate their simple supper, Luna set down her spoon. "I think we should have people over," she said, "for a meal." Ephraim looked up, surprise clear on his weathered face. "What for?" "To show them who we are, that we're not afraid, that we're willing to be neighbors." She leaned forward earnestly. "The railroad wants to isolate us, make us seem like outsiders. But if we bring people together, could backfire," Ephraim warned. "Might not anyone come." "Some will," Luna insisted. "The settlers you've helped before, the Apache families you trade with, maybe even some folks from town who are tired of the railroad's bullying." Ephraim was quiet for a long moment, studying his plate. Finally, he looked up at her. "You really want to do this?" Luna nodded. "I do. Then we'd better start getting ready." The next few days were filled with preparation. Ephraim went hunting, bringing back 2 deer and several grouse. Luna baked loaf after loaf of bread, filling the cabin with the homey smell of yeast and flour. They set up rough benches outside the cabin, using planks laid across logs. Word spread through the valley. Luna mentioned it to the storekeeper's wife, who told the blacksmith's family. Ephraim spoke to his Apache trading partners when they came by, with pelts to trade. Even the preacher heard about it and stopped by to say he might attend. The morning of the gathering dawned clear and cold. Luna had been up since before first light, cooking and arranging things. Ephraim worked quietly beside her, carrying benches, stoking fires, and setting up a long table made from boards and sawhorses. "You sure about this?" he asked one last time as the sun climbed higher. Luna looked at him, her face flushed from cooking. "Yes," she said simply. The first guests arrived, bundled in blankets and carrying dishes to share the poor settler family they'd fed before, bringing a pot of beans. Then came others, a widow and her 3 sons from the next valley over, the blacksmith and his wife from town, 2 Apache families Ephraim had known for years. Luna welcomed them all, making sure everyone had a place to sit and a warm cup of coffee. The Apache women helped her serve the food, showing her their own way of preparing the venison that made it especially tender. More people arrived throughout the afternoon. Children played in the snow while their parents talked and ate. The preacher came, bringing his wife and a basket of preserves. Even the storekeeper made an appearance, though he didn't stay long. The gathering was nothing fancy, just simple food and fellowship in the winter Sunday. But Luna saw how people who normally kept their distance began to talk, sharing stories and concerns about the railroad's growing power in the valley. One of the Apache men spoke of springs on their traditional lands that had been fenced off. The blacksmith mentioned how the railroad had tried to force him to sell his shop. The widow told of threats to her water rights. "They think because we're scattered, we're weak," the blacksmith's wife said, warming her hands around a cup of coffee. But together, Luna noticed how Ephraim moved among their guests, more at ease than she'd ever seen him. He spoke with the Apache men in their own language, played with the settler children, shared hunting stories with the other mountain men who'd come. As the afternoon light began to fade, people gathered closer around the fires. Someone brought out a fiddle, and music filled the cold air. Luna watched as their guests tapped their feet and clapped along, their faces lit by firelight and fellowship. "You were right," Ephraim said quietly, coming to stand beside her. "This was worth doing." Luna felt warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the fires. "Those men in town, they think my size makes me something to laugh at. But maybe being big just means having more room in your heart for bringing people together." Ephraim's hand found hers, rough and warm. "Reckon that's exactly what it means." As the guests began to leave, bundling up against the growing cold, many stopped to thank them. The Apache women hugged Luna, calling her sister in their language. The settler children begged to come back soon. The widow was one of the last to leave. She gripped Luna's hand tightly. "You've done something important here today," she said. "Shown us we're not alone." Luna watched their guests disappear into the gathering dusk, their lanterns like fireflies moving through the dark. The yard was scattered with footprints in the snow, evidence of the community that had gathered there. She and Ephraim worked together to clean up, carrying dishes back into the cabin, banking the outdoor fires. The air was getting sharper with night's approach, but Luna felt warmed from within by the day's events. The railroad man was wrong, she said as they finished their work. The mountains aren't just a place for accidents and threats. They're a place where people can come together, if someone's willing to make the first move. Ephraim nodded, understanding in his eyes, and you were the one brave enough to make it. The winter afternoon cast long shadows across the snow as Luna stood beside the cooking fire, stirring the prasit commanderin into present, enormous pot of venison stew. Steam rose in fragrant clouds, carrying the rich aroma of herbs and root vegetables through the crisp air. Around her, the gathering had grown beyond anything she'd imagined. At least 30 people spread across their yard, sharing warmth and conversation around several small fires. Luna ladled the thick stew into wooden bowls, her movements steady and sure. With each serving, she offered a smile and a thick slice of fresh bread, still warm from baking. Ephraim stood at her shoulder, a solid presence that made her feel anchored and strong. His scarred hands passed the filled bowls to waiting guests, his usual gruffness softened by the spirit of the gathering. "Much obliged, Mrs. Cutter," old widow Jensen said as she accepted a steaming bowl. "Smells just like my mama used to make." "There's plenty more," Luna assured her, pleased to see how the widow's thin face had brightened. "Make sure those boys of yours get seconds." Near one of the fires, Two Rivers and his family sat with the blacksmith's clan, their children playing together in the snow nearby. The Apache elder was sharing stories of his youth, his words drawing listeners closer. Even the preacher leaned in, nodding thoughtfully as Two Rivers described the valley's changes over the decades. "Your wife has a good heart." Two Rivers' wife, Morning Star, said to Ephraim in careful English. "She understands the old ways that food shared makes family." Ephraim's hand found Luna's back, resting there warm and sure. "That she does." Luna felt her cheeks flush, and not just from the fire's heat. She busied herself with serving more stew, but her heart swelled at the simple praise. All around them, the gathering had taken on a life of its own. People who normally kept their distance in town now sat knee to knee, passing bread and sharing cups of coffee. The settler children had made friends with the Apache youngsters, their laughter ringing out as they played fox and geese in the trampled snow. Their mothers watched with obvious pleasure, exchanging knowing looks over their bowls of stew. Luna noticed how the kids didn't see differences. They only saw playmates and possibilities. As the afternoon deepened toward evening, someone produced a fiddle from beneath a wagon seat. Soon, toe-tapping music filled the air, mixing with the crack and pop of the fires. The blacksmith's oldest boy knew some reels, and his playing drew people to their feet. Even Two Rivers' youngest daughter joined in, her dark braids flying as she learned the steps. Luna worked steadily, making sure everyone had enough to eat, that the fires stayed hot, that no one felt left out. She had never felt more in her element. Her size, so often a source of mockery, now seemed exactly right for the task of caring for so many. Her strong arms could lift heavy pots, her broad shoulders could carry loads of firewood, and her big heart had room for everyone's needs. The lanterns were lit as dusk approached, their golden light catching the contentment on people's faces. Luna paused in her work, taking in the scene. Ephraim was showing some of the men his method for smoking meat, his hands moving in easy demonstration. The widow Jensen sat with Morning Star, learning to bead on a small piece of leather. The preacher's wife had organized the children into singing songs, their sweet voices rising into the darkening sky. "You've done something remarkable here," the preacher said, appearing at Luna's elbow. "In all my years in the valley, I've never seen folks come together like this." Luna wiped her hands on her apron. "People were ready for it, I reckon. Sometimes they just need a reason to remember we're all neighbors." "The railroad men won't like it," he warned gently. "They prefer us divided." "Then we'll have to stay united," Luna said firmly, and was surprised by the conviction in her own voice. As the evening deepened, families began to pack up their empty bowls and gathering their children. The goodbyes were warm and lingering, full of thanks and promises to return. Two Rivers' family was among the last to leave, helping to bank the fires and stack the benches. "You have made strong medicine today," Morning Star told Luna, pressing a small beaded pouch into her hand. "Not with herbs or ceremonies, but with an open heart. This is the real power that makes people whole." Luna clutched the gift, touched beyond words. She watched as the last wagons and riders disappeared into the darkness, their lanterns bobbing like earthbound stars through the trees. The yard was quiet now, but it felt full of lingering warmth and good spirits. She and Ephraim worked together to clean up, their movements synchronized after months of sharing space. They carried dishes into the cabin, stacked the borrowed benches under the lean-to, and made sure the fires were safely out. The night had grown sharp with frost, but Luna barely felt the cold. Inside the cabin, Ephraim built up the fire while Luna put water on for tea. The familiar tasks felt different somehow, charged with new meaning after the day's events. When the tea was ready, they settled into their usual spots by the hearth. But instead of the comfortable silence that usually fell between them, Ephraim spoke. "Thank you," he said softly, his voice rough with emotion. Luna looked up from her cup. "What for?" "For showing me what home could feel like." He stared into the fire, choosing his words carefully. "Been living in these mountains near 20 years, but today was the first time this place felt like more than just shelter." Luna felt something shift in her chest, like ice breaking up in spring. Slowly, carefully, she leaned over until her head rested against Ephraim's solid shoulder. She felt him stiffen for just a moment, then relax, his arm coming up to curve around her. They sat that way for a long while, watching the fire dance and listening to the wind in the pines outside. Luna could hear Ephraim's steady heartbeat, feel the rise and fall of his breathing. For the first time since stepping off that train, she felt completely, utterly at peace. "You know what Two Rivers' wife said was true," Ephraim murmured after a while. "You do have a good heart. Best I've ever known." Luna closed her eyes, letting his words sink in. "And you have a good soul," Ephraim cut her, "even if you try to hide it behind those scars and silences." She felt rather than heard his soft chuckle. His hand found hers, rough fingers intertwining with her work-hardened ones. Outside, an owl called into the darkness, and somewhere far off, a coyote answered. But here by the fire, in this moment of newfound tenderness, Luna and Ephraim had found their own kind of music, the quiet song of two hearts finally beating in time. The tea grew cold in their cups, forgotten as they sat together in the firelight, neither willing to break the spell of this first true moment of intimacy. Luna knew there would be challenges ahead. The railroad wouldn't give up easily, and there would always be those who looked down on their unusual match. But for now, in this quiet cabin with the man who had chosen her when others laughed, she felt strong enough to face whatever might come. The night settled cold and clear over the line shack. Luna and Ephraim lay in their separate sleeping spaces, she on the narrow cot, he on his bedroll near the stove. The day's warmth from their gathering still lingered in Luna's heart as she drifted off, wrapped in quilts against the mountain chill. A flickering light through the window jolted her awake. At first, she thought it was early dawn, but the orange glow was too bright, too violent. Ephraim was already on his feet, rifle in hand. "The barn!" His voice cracked with alarm. Through the window, flames leaped skyward, consuming the small structure where they kept their mule and winter supplies. Luna scrambled for her boots. "The animals! Stay inside!" Ephraim commanded, but she was already moving toward the door behind him. The crack of a rifle split the night. Splinters flew from the doorframe inches from Ephraim's head. He shoved Luna back, slamming the door shut. More shots followed, the bullets thudding into the cabin's logs. "Get down!" Ephraim pushed her toward the far corner, away from the windows. They crouched in the shadows, watching helplessly as the barn burned. Luna's hands trembled. Who would? Railroad men, most likely. Or the ranchers. Ephraim's face was grim in the firelight streaming through the windows. Been expecting something like this. The heat from the burning barn reached them even inside the cabin. Luna could hear their mule braying in terror, then silence. Her throat tightened with grief and rage. Through the long hours until dawn, they stayed low, listening to the crack of burning timber and occasional gunfire. Ephraim kept his rifle ready, watching the windows. Luna made herself small beside him, her shoulder pressed against his, drawing strength from his solid presence. As the first gray light touched the sky, the shooting stopped. The barn was nothing but smoldering ruins. Ephraim waited another hour before carefully opening the door, rifle first. "Stay here," he told Luna. She watched through the window as he moved cautiously toward the burned structure, checking for attackers. His curse carried clearly in the morning air. The mule's gone. They must have taken him before setting the fire. Luna joined him outside, her boots crunching in the snow. The barn's remains smoked in the pale light, black timbers jutting like broken bones. Their winter supplies, grain, hay, tools all destroyed. Ephraim burst back into the cabin, yanking open drawers, searching shelves. No. What is it? The deed. His voice was hollow. It's gone. Must have taken it during the chaos. He slammed his fist against the wall. Fool, I should have hidden it better. Luna sank into a chair, the reality of their situation settling like lead in her stomach. Without the deed, her claim to the land was in danger. Without the mule and supplies, surviving the winter would be harder. They were still assessing the damage when hoofbeats approached. Luna's heart leaped, hoping for help, but Ephraim's expression darkened as Sheriff Hartley rode up with 2 deputies. "Ephraim Cutter," the sheriff called out, not dismounting. "Got some questions about this fire." "Been waiting for you, Amos." Ephraim stepped forward, hands clearly visible. "Happened just after midnight. Shooters kept us pinned inside while the barn burned." The sheriff's deputy spat into the snow. "Convenient story. Word in town is you said it yourself, aiming to claim insurance money." Luna stepped forward. "That's a lie. We were attacked." "Ma'am, step back." Sheriff Hartley's voice was firm but not unkind. "Ephraim, I'm going to need you to come with us. Got some serious accusations to sort out." "You know who's behind this, Amos." Ephraim's voice was deadly quiet. "Railroad's been threatening us for weeks. What I know is the railroad man's lawyer was in my office at dawn, showing papers proving they own this land. Said you knew it when you burned the barn." The sheriff shifted uncomfortably in his saddle. "They're pressing charges. The land is mine," Luna protested. "I have the deed." She stopped, remembering the stolen document. "No deed was registered at the county office," the sheriff said. "Now, Ephraim, we can do this peaceful or not." Luna watched helplessly as Ephraim set his rifle down. His face was carved from stone as the deputies bound his hands. "It'll be all right, Luna," he said softly. "Just stay here. Stay safe." "You can't take him." Luna grabbed the sheriff's reins. "He's innocent. Step back, Mrs. Cutter." Sheriff Hartley's hand rested on his pistol. "Don't make this worse." One of the deputies pushed her aside. She stumbled in the snow, watching through tears as they led Ephraim away. His broad shoulders were straight with dignity, but she could see the defeat in his stride. The morning stretched into afternoon. Luna moved through the cabin like a ghost, straightening things that didn't need straightening, unable to rest. She forced herself to eat a little bread, knowing she needed strength, but it tasted like ashes in her mouth. The silence pressed in around her. No crackle of barn animals settling for the night. No soft whistling as Ephraim cleaned his rifle. No comfortable sounds of 2 people sharing space. Just the wind in the pines and her own ragged breathing. She stood in the doorway as evening approached, watching the sun sink behind the mountains. The burned barn skeleton threw long shadows across the snow. Everything they'd built together, the gathering's warmth, their growing trust, the tender moment by the fire seemed as fragile as smoke in the wind. A wolf howled in the distance, the sound achingly lonely. Luna wrapped her arms around herself, feeling the vastness of the mountains pressing in. She was alone now, truly alone, in a cabin that suddenly felt too big and too empty. Inside, she lit the lamp and stirred up the stove, going through the motions of making a meal for one. The plate of beans and salt pork seemed to mock her with its solitude. She couldn't bring herself to sit in her usual spot by the fire. The space beside her was too obviously vacant. Instead, she pulled Ephraim's old rocker to the window, keeping watch over the darkness beyond. His scent still clung to the chair's worn cushion, pine sap and leather, wood smoke and wool. Luna pressed her face into the fabric for a moment, allowing herself one quiet sob, but only one. She straightened up, squaring her shoulders. Ephraim needed her strong now, not weeping in the dark. She would find a way to prove his innocence, to recover the deed, to fight back against the forces trying to break them. The night stretched endless before her. But Luna May Cutter sat straight in the rocker, her eyes on the road to town, and began to plan. The morning sun cast long shadows across the snow as Luna stepped out of the cabin. She had spent hours in the night planning this moment, rehearsing her words. The walk to town would take 2 hours on foot without the mule, but she squared her shoulders and began the journey. Her boots crunched through fresh powder, each step deliberate and measured. The cold bit through her patched coat, but Luna barely noticed. Her mind was fixed on Ephraim, alone in that cell, facing false charges that could destroy everything they'd built. As she crested the final hill overlooking Gunnison, the town's morning bustle drifted up to meet her. Wagons creaked along the muddy streets, and smoke rose from chimneys into the crisp mountain air. Luna paused, taking deep breaths to steady herself. This was the same town that had laughed at her arrival, that had whispered cruel jokes about her size. But she was different now, no longer the timid mail-order bride stepping off the train. The first stares began as she entered the town proper. A group of women outside the general store fell silent as she passed, their eyes following her progress down the street. Luna kept her chin high, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "Heard your husband's a barn burner," someone called out. Laughter rippled through the growing crowd. Luna didn't turn. She fixed her eyes on the white-painted church ahead, its spire reaching toward the morning sky. The steps creaked under her weight as she climbed them, pushing open the heavy wooden door. Inside, the church was silent save for the soft pop of candles burning near the altar. Sunlight streamed through colored windows, painting the empty pews in blues and golds. Luna's footsteps echoed as she moved down the center aisle. At the front, she lowered herself carefully onto her knees. The hard floor pressed against her bones, but she welcomed the discomfort. It kept her mind sharp, focused on her purpose. "Lord," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "I ain't never asked for much, but I'm asking now for wisdom to see the path ahead clear, for courage to walk it, no matter how hard, and for strength," her voice caught, "strength to help the man who saw worth in me when others saw only size to mock." Behind her, floorboards creaked. Luna didn't turn, continuing her prayer. "They mean to break us, Lord, to take our land, our dignity, our future, but you made me big for a reason. Help me use that bigness for good." "Amen," came a quiet voice. Preacher Mills stepped into view, his lined face solemn in the candlelight. He settled onto the front pew, saying nothing for a long moment. Luna remained on her knees, waiting. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the gentle flutter of candle flames. "You know," the preacher finally spoke, his voice gentle, "I've married hundreds of couples in this church, most of them young, starry-eyed, full of dreams. But when I married you and Ephraim that day at the depot, I saw something different, something rare." Luna turned to look at him. "What did you see?" "Two people who understood that love ain't about pretty words or easy paths. It's about standing firm when storms come." He leaned forward, clasping his weathered hands. "The good book tells us true strength is tested in fire, like gold in a furnace, being refined." "I don't feel very strong," Luna admitted. "Everything's falling apart." "Is it?" The preacher's eyes were kind but challenging. "Or are you finally discovering just how strong you really are?" Luna considered his words, feeling something shift inside her chest. She had spent so long trying to make herself smaller, to apologize for taking up space. But maybe her size wasn't a curse after all. Maybe it was exactly what she needed to be. She rose from her knees, standing tall in the church's quiet sanctuary. "Thank you, Preacher Mills." He nodded, a slight smile, touching his lips. "Go with God, Mrs. Cutter. And remember, the same fire that destroys chaff makes steel stronger." The morning had warmed slightly when Luna stepped back outside. She walked with new purpose toward the jailhouse, ignoring the whispers that followed her progress. The deputy at the desk barely looked up as she entered. "Come to see the barn burner?" he drawled. "My husband," Luna corrected firmly. "I aim to speak with him." The deputy shrugged, reaching for his keys. 5 minutes, and don't pass him nothing." The cell block was dim and cold, smelling of old straw and unwashed bodies. Ephraim sat on a narrow cot in the last cell, his broad shoulders hunched against the chill. When he looked up, Luna's heart clenched at the bruise darkening his jaw. "They hurt you," she said softly. "Ain't nothing." Ephraim stood, moving to the bars. "You shouldn't have come, Luna. Town ain't safe right now." "I ain't afraid." She reached through the bars to touch his bruised face. "Not anymore." His eyes searched hers, seeing the change that had come over her. Gone was the uncertain woman who had trembled at the depot. In her place stood someone who filled the space she occupied without apology. "My size is my strength," Luna told him, her voice steady and sure. "They think to use it against me, to make me feel shame, but I'm done being ashamed. They will not break me." Ephraim's calloused hand covered hers where it rested on his cheek. "No," he said softly. "Reckon they won't. I'm going to fight for you," she continued. "For our land. For everything we've built together. I don't know how yet, but I will find a way." A ghost of a smile touched Ephraim's lips. "I believe you." "Time's up," the deputy called from the front. Luna squeezed Ephraim's hand through the bars. "Hold fast," she whispered. "I'm coming back. Luna." Ephraim's voice stopped her as she turned to leave. That day at the depot, when I chose you, want you to know something. She waited, watching, his face in the dim light. Wasn't just your size made me speak up, he said quietly. Was the way you held yourself. Dignity, even when they laughed. Knew right then you had steel in your spine. Tears pricked Luna's eyes, but she blinked them back. Rest easy, husband. That steel's about to serve us both. She walked out of the jailhouse with her head high, ignoring the deputy's smirk. Outside, the morning had brightened into full day. Luna paused on the boardwalk, looking up at the mountains that had become her home. They stood immovable against the sky, their snow-capped peaks gleaming in the Sunday. Like those mountains, she would stand firm. Let them mock her size. Let them whisper their cruel jokes. She was done trying to make herself small to please others. Every inch of her height, every ounce of her strength, would become a weapon in this fight. Luna May Cutter turned toward the lawyer's office, her steps purposeful on the wooden planks. The time for shrinking back was over. Now was the time to stand tall. Luna saddled Ephraim's old mare at first light, her movements careful and deliberate. The horse's breath steamed in the cold morning air as Luna checked the girth strap one final time. She had wrapped extra bread in clean cloth, tucking it into her saddlebags along with a small pouch of coffee beans, a gesture of respect she'd learned from Ephraim. The sun was just beginning to paint the eastern sky when she guided the mare down the trail leading to the Apache winter camp. Ephraim had brought her here twice before to trade, teaching her the proper ways to approach and show respect. Now she would need every bit of that knowledge. Frost crunched under the mare's hooves as they descended into the sheltered valley where the Apache made their winter home. Smoke from cooking fires rose straight up in the still morning air. Luna's heart beat faster as she spotted the first sentries, but she kept her posture straight and her movements slow and obvious. 2 mounted warriors approached, their faces impassive. Luna raised her empty right hand in greeting, just as Ephraim had shown her. I seek counsel with Elder Nantan, she said clearly. I bring gifts and ask for wisdom. The warriors exchanged glances, then one nodded toward the camp. Luna followed their lead, conscious of curious eyes watching from between the lodges. Children paused in their morning chores to stare at the large woman on the horse. Elder Nantan sat wrapped in a blanket before his lodge, his weathered face turned toward the rising Sunday. He showed no surprise at Luna's arrival, though his dark eyes held keen interest as she carefully dismounted. Elder, Luna said respectfully, keeping her distance until invited closer. I come seeking truth about the railroad men who crossed these lands. Nantan studied her for a long moment. The wife of the mountain man, he said finally, the one who shared food with our hungry ones. Luna nodded, remembering the evening when several Apache families had joined their gathering at the shack. Yes, Elder, my husband sits in jail on false charges, and our land deed was stolen. I believe the railroad men who crossed your hunting grounds may know why. The elder gestured for her to sit nearby. Luna settled herself carefully, reaching into her saddlebag for the bread and coffee. She presented them with both hands, waiting as Nantan examined the offerings. Your man, Nantan said slowly. He shows respect for old ways, not like the railroad men who break treaties as easily as dry twigs. He accepted the gifts with a slight nod. What would you know? The truth about where they've built their lines, Luna replied. My land lies near yours. If they've broken treaties there. Nantan's face grew stern. They cross boundaries marked by our fathers' fathers. Drive game from winter grounds. Cut trees from sacred slopes. He pointed toward the distant hills. Your land touches old hunting trails. Railroad men want it all. No, respect for paper promises or ancient rights. Luna leaned forward earnestly. Elder, would you speak this truth before the judge? Tell how they break treaties and steal land? The old man was silent for several long moments, considering. Finally, he spoke. Words are sacred, must be used with care. But when truth needs voice, he met Luna's eyes. We will speak. Relief flooded through Luna. She bowed her head in gratitude. Thank you, Elder. Your words may save more than just our land. As she prepared to leave, Nantan raised his hand. Wait. He disappeared into his lodge, returning with a small bundle wrapped in soft hide. Healing herbs, he explained, for your man's hurts. Luna accepted the gift with careful reverence, tucking it safely in her coat. The ride back to town was longer, as she took a winding path that led past several outlying homesteads. The sun was high when she approached the first cabin, home to a widow and her 3 children. Sarah Miller was hanging wash when Luna rode up. The widow's face showed surprise, then concern. "Luna, is everything all right?" "Brought you something," Luna said, dismounting with a loaf of fresh bread in hand. Sarah's eyes widened at the sight of it. "You're too kind," she protested, but Luna could see how her fingers trembled as she accepted the loaf. "The children haven't had fresh bread since your Joseph passed," Luna finished gently. "I remember how folks helped me when I first arrived. Reckon it's time to pass that kindness on." She stayed only briefly, but as she rode away, she heard Sarah calling to her children about the treat they'd have with dinner. Luna smiled, turning her horse toward the next homestead. By mid-afternoon, she had visited 5 families, each time sharing bread and careful words about justice and standing together. Some faces showed fear at mention of the railroad baron, but others grew thoughtful, remembering their own struggles against powerful men. The sun was lowering when Luna finally rode into town proper. She tied her horse outside the general store, squaring her shoulders against the inevitable stares and whispers. Inside, she found Mrs. Henderson, the storekeeper's wife, arranging dry goods. Luna cut her. "Mrs. Henderson said, surprise evident in her voice. "I wouldn't have expected. Just needed some sugar," Luna said calmly, setting coins on the counter. "And to say thank you for being kind to me that first day, when others weren't." Mrs. Henderson's face softened at the memory. People can be cruel when they don't understand something or someone. She glanced around, then lowered her voice. "I never believed Ephraim would burn his own barn, not with how hard he works." "No," Luna agreed quietly. "He wouldn't." The older woman hesitated, then spoke quickly. "My Thomas, he saw strange men riding near your place the night before the fire. Didn't think to mention it until after, but..." Luna's heart quickened. "Would he say so to others?" "Mrs. Henderson straightened her apron. "Well, I suppose if enough folks were asking for the truth." Word spread quietly through the afternoon. As dusk approached, Luna found herself in the back room of the church, surrounded by a small but determined group. Sarah Miller was there, her children sleeping on a pew outside. Thomas Henderson sat with his wife, his face serious as he described the riders he'd seen. 3 other families who had shared Luna's hospitality weeks before added their own stories of railroad men's threats and broken promises. Preacher Mills joined them, his presence lending weight to their gathering. "The truth must be spoken," he said firmly, "no matter how powerful those who wish it silent." Luna looked around the circle of faces. Poor settlers, a storekeeper's family, a widow, a preacher, not many, but a start, and with the Apache testimony. "They think because I'm big, I'm something to mock," she said quietly. "Because Ephraim's rough, he's something to fear. Because you're poor, you're something to ignore." She stood, her height for once feeling right in the shadowy room. "But together, we're something else. Something stronger." Sarah Miller stood too, then the Hendersons. One by one, they all rose, determination replacing fear in their eyes. Luna felt tears threatening but held them back. There would be time for tears later, when Ephraim was free and their land secure. For now, there was work to do, truth to be told, and justice to be sought. Luna looked at each face in turn, seeing not mockery or pity, but something new. Respect. The church bell tolled the evening hour, its deep notes rolling across the darkening town. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, Luna had found what she sought: allies willing to stand beside her, voice rising with hers against the powerful men who thought they could steal and threaten without consequence. She gathered her coat, preparing to ride back to the empty shack. But she was no longer alone in her fight. That knowledge warmed her more than any fire could. Sarah Miller touched her arm as they left the church. "We'll come to court tomorrow," she promised. "All of us." Luna nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. She mounted her horse, turning its head toward home. Behind her, she could hear the others making their own plans, their voices carrying determination and purpose into the gathering night. The morning dawned sharp and clear, frost glittering on the wooden sidewalks of Gunnison's town square. Luna stood before her mirror in the line shack, pinning her hair neat and straight. Her best dress, freshly pressed, still pulled tight across her shoulders. But today she refused to hunch. Let them see her size. Let them see her strength. The ride into town was silent, except for her horse's hooves crunching through patches of snow. Already, wagons and riders converged on the square, drawn by word of the hearing. Luna's heart thumped harder with each familiar face she passed, some nodding and greeting, others turning away. Sheriff Hartley had arranged chairs and tables in front of the courthouse steps. He paced now, checking his pocket watch, his weathered face creased with worry. When Luna dismounted, he gave her a quick, uncertain nod. "Quite a crowd gathering," he said, gesturing to the growing mass of townspeople. "Railroad men arrived an hour ago, been holed up in the hotel with their lawyer." "Thank you for holding this hearing, Sheriff," Luna said quietly. He shifted, uncomfortable. "Law's the law, Mrs. Cutter, even if some folks don't like how it falls." Luna watched as two deputies led Ephraim from the jail. Her heart clenched at his bruised face, but his eyes were clear and steady when they met hers. They'd allowed him to wash and shave, at least, though his wrists remained shackled. The crowd parted as Harrison Vale, the railroad baron, emerged from the hotel. His suit was Eastern cut, his boots polished to a mirror shine. Behind him walked his lawyer, Mr. Phillips, carrying a leather portfolio stuffed with papers. They took their places at one of the tables, Phillips arranging documents with precise movements. Luna felt a touch on her arm. Sarah Miller stood there with her children, all dressed in their Sunday best. Behind her, the Hendersons and other families who had met in the church stepped forward. And there, at the edge of the crowd, Luna saw Nanton and two other Apache leaders, their faces grave but determined. Sheriff Hartley cleared his throat. This hearing's called to address matters concerning disputed land claims and related criminal charges. He glanced at his notes. Railroads claiming right of passage through contested territory and— "If I may, Sheriff," Phillips interrupted, standing smoothly. "This proceeding is unnecessary. I have documentation proving the deed in question was fraudulently obtained." He withdrew papers from his portfolio. "Mrs. Cutter's claim is invalid on its face." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Luna felt heat rise in her cheeks but kept her voice steady. "That's not true." Phillips smiled thinly. "The original grant predates your uncle's claim by 20 years. The railroad's rights are quite clear." He passed documents to the sheriff. "As you can see, those papers are lies." The words came clear and strong across the square. Luna turned to see Thomas Henderson standing. "Just like the lies you told when you seized Wilson's farm last spring." Vale's face darkened. "Mind your place, storekeeper." "I'll mind truth," Henderson replied. "I saw your men riding near the Cutter's place the night before the fire. Saw them clear as day." More voices rose from the crowd. Sarah Miller stepped forward, her children clinging to her skirts. "You threatened my Joseph the same way before he died, claiming he had no right to his own land." The sheriff raised his hands. "Order, now. This hearing's about specific claims. Then hear mine." Luna moved to the center of the square, her heart pounding but her voice clear. "I have witnesses who'll testify how the railroad crosses treaty lands without permission, how they threaten and burn out anyone who stands in their way." She nodded to Nanton, who stepped forward with dignity. The crowd hushed. Few had expected Apache testimony at a white man's hearing. "For many winters," Nanton said in careful English, "my people hunt these valleys, make peace with settlers who respect old ways. But railroad men break all promises, take what they want." He pointed to Vale. "This man's paper's worth nothing against truth." Vale surged to his feet. "You'd take the word of savages over legal documents? This is absurd." "Watch your tongue," Ephraim growled from his place between the deputies. It was the first time he'd spoken, and heads turned at the menace in his voice. Luna seized the moment. "My uncle's deed is real. The land is mine by law and right. But this isn't just about papers." She looked around the square, meeting eyes that had once mocked her. "It's about justice. About standing together against men who think they can burn and steal and threaten without consequence." She withdrew letters from her coat correspondence between her uncle and the land office, proving his claim. "I have evidence of my own, and I have witnesses who will testify about threats made against my husband and me, about suspicious riders the night of the fire, about patterns of intimidation against other farmers and settlers." Phillips tried to object, but Luna's voice carried over his. "You thought because I'm big, I'm something to laugh at. Because I'm a woman alone, I'm something to bully. You were wrong." The square had grown so quiet she could hear the wind shifting prayer flags at the Apache camp beyond town. In that silence, Sarah Miller's oldest boy tugged free from his mother and ran to Luna, wrapping his arms around her skirts. The simple gesture of trust brought tears to Luna's eyes, but she blinked them back. "Sheriff," she said, I ask that you postpone this hearing until all evidence can be properly heard. Let every witness speak. Let truth have its day." Sheriff Hartley stroked his mustache, looking between the railroad men and the gathered townspeople. Vale's face had grown thunderous, but the crowd's mood had shifted. Where there had been uncertain murmurs, now Luna saw nodding heads and straightened shoulders. "Reckon that's fair," the sheriff said finally. "We'll reconvene in 3 days' time." Meanwhile, he looked at Ephraim. No evidence connecting Cutter to the fire beyond circumstance. He's released on his own recognizance. The deputies unlocked Ephraim's shackles. He rubbed his wrists, eyes fixed on Luna, with a pride that made her cheeks warm. Vale and his lawyer gathered their papers, faces dark with barely contained rage. As they stalked toward the hotel, Luna heard Vale mutter, "This isn't finished." But she barely registered the threat. Ephraim had reached her side, his calloused hand finding hers. Around them, townspeople pressed close the Hendersons, Sarah Miller and her children, others who had found their voices at last. Nanton approached, touching his chest in greeting. "You speak with strong heart," he said to Luna. "We return in 3 days. Bring more proof of broken treaties." "Thank you," Luna whispered. "For everything." The crowd slowly dispersed, but something had changed. Luna saw it in the way people walked taller, spoke more freely. Fear still lingered, the railroad's power was real, but it no longer ruled unchallenged. She was bone-weary as she and Ephraim walked to their waiting horses. The morning's courage had drained away, leaving her trembling slightly. "You did good," Ephraim said quietly, helping her mount despite her size. His touch was gentle, belying his rough appearance. "Real good." Luna managed a tired smile. "We did good, all of us together." They rode home through the lengthening afternoon shadows, the mountain air crisp in their lungs. The line shack waited, smoke curling from its chimney where Sarah Miller had lit a fire before the hearing. Simple kindness returned. Luna's body ached from tension, her mind already turning to the work ahead, gathering more evidence, preparing witnesses, facing whatever revenge the railroad might plan. But she was no longer afraid. She had found her voice, and others had found theirs alongside her. The truth would have its day. That was enough for now. Luna's days blurred together in a whirlwind of service. Each morning, she rose before dawn, trudging through snow to help the Wilsons haul water from the creek. Their youngest had taken ill, and Luna spent hours brewing willow bark tea, telling stories to distract the feverish child while his mother caught precious moments of sleep. In the afternoons, she set up her sewing basket on the church steps. Word spread that she mended clothes for free, and soon worn garments appeared, torn sleeves, split seams, patches kneaded on children's knees. Her large hands worked the needle with surprising delicacy, each stitch a small act of love. "Never seen someone your size with such gentle ways," Sarah Miller said, watching Luna repair her boy's coat. Luna smiled, remembering how those same words had once carried mockery. Now they held warmth. "The good Lord gave me these hands for helping," she replied simply. Across town in his jail cell, Ephraim sat on his thin cot, watching dust motes dance in the sunlight streaming through barred windows. His customary scowl had softened during these quiet days. He thought of Luna, how she'd transformed from a trembling mail-order bride into someone who made others stand taller in her presence. The preacher's boots echoed on the wooden floor as he approached Ephraim's cell. "Brought you some coffee," he said, passing a tin cup through the bars. "Much obliged," Ephraim muttered. "The Lord works in mysterious ways," the preacher continued, settling onto a bench. "Sometimes our greatest blessings come disguised as trials." Ephraim traced the rim of his cup. "Reckon you're right about that. Never thought I'd find hope again, least of all in someone society scorned." He paused, "like they once scorned me for my scars." "Trust in his timing," the preacher advised gently. "Your Luna's doing his work out there." In her small room above the general store, Luna laid out pieces of fabric, remnants from her mending work. Her fingers smoothed each scrap as she planned a new dress for the hearing. The material wasn't fine, but she would make it beautiful. Like everything else in her life, she would transform what others discarded into something worthy of respect. She worked late into the night, the lamp casting her shadow large against the wall. In its light, she looked like what she was becoming, a woman whose size matched the breadth of her heart. Gray clouds hung low over the town square as townspeople gathered, their breath visible in the cold morning air. Luna stood straight-backed in her newly sewn dress, facing the makeshift court where the sheriff presided. The railroad baron's lawyer gestured dramatically, his voice carrying across the crowd. These water rights were legally obtained. the lawyer declared, waving documents. This woman's claim is baseless. Elder Nantan stepped forward, his weathered hands carefully unrolling yellowed maps. The crowd hushed as he spoke with quiet authority. These boundaries were set by treaty, he said, pointing to clear markings. The railroad's claims cross sacred lands. They have no right to touch. The baron's face reddened as the elder traced the true property lines, exposing how the railroad had deliberately misdrawn boundaries. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Luna's voice rang clear and strong. This land will not be sold. It will be shared with those who need it. She gestured to the gathered families, settlers, Apache, widows with children. There's room enough for all who respect it. Sheriff Hartley studied the evidence, his lined face grave. After a long moment, he nodded. "Release Mr. Cutter," he ordered. These charges were false. The crowd erupted, cheers mixing with gasps of surprise. Ephraim emerged from the jailhouse, striding purposefully toward Luna. Before everyone gathered, he took her hand in his. "This here's my rightful wife and partner," he declared proudly, his scarred face softening as he looked at her. "And I reckon she's proved herself stronger than any of us." The weeks following the trial brought new life to the valley. Dawn light found neighbors arriving with tools and timber, ready to help rebuild what had been lost. The sound of hammers rang through the crisp mountain air as Ephraim directed the barn raising, his gruff voice calling measurements while men steadied beams. Luna moved among the workers, passing out cups of water and fresh bread. Her size, once a source of mockery, now proved perfect for steadying posts and lifting heavy boards. Children darted between the adults, carrying nails and smaller tools, their laughter mixing with the work songs. Apache families came to trade and visit, sharing meals around evening fires. Their elders taught Luna about native plants, while she offered warm quilts in return. The boundaries that had once divided them faded like morning mist. One evening, the little line shack glowed golden against the darkening sky. Inside, Luna stood at the head of a long table she and Ephraim had built together. Widow Mitchell's children squeezed onto benches beside weather-worn settlers. The room hummed with conversation as bowls of stew passed from hand to hand. Luna felt warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the crackling stove. Here, finally, she wasn't the awkward giant who never quite fit. She belonged. Ephraim appeared at her side, his rough hand finding hers. "You've made this more than just a shack," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You've made it a home." Luna squeezed his hand, watching their gathered family of choice share stories and break bread together. She had found her place at last. The fire's glow painted shadows on the cabin walls as Luna and Ephraim sat together on the rough-hewn bench. Their neighbors had departed hours ago, leaving only the soft breathing of borrowed children sleeping on makeshift cots in the corner. The crackle of burning pine filled the comfortable silence between them. Ephraim's calloused fingers found Luna's work-worn hand, studying it in the firelight. "I wanted the thick one," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper, "because you were never small in spirit." Tears welled in Luna's eyes as she leaned against his shoulder. Through the window, snowflakes drifted down, each flake catching the moonlight before joining its brothers in the deepening blanket below. Their contested valley, now peaceful, had become their sanctuary. Together, they bowed their heads. In the warmth of their shared prayer, they gave thanks for the mercy, justice, and unexpected love that had brought them together. Thank you for listening. Stories connect us in the most unexpected ways. If you felt that spark today, make sure you're subscribed. I share a new one daily, and the next might change your day.